The lawyer slid the folder across the table, and my brother let out a laugh I'll never forget. A bakery, he said, drawing the word out like it tasted bad. Dad left you a dead bakery on the wrong side of Cleveland. That fits you, doesn't it, sis? Always smelling like flour and failure. I didn't say anything. I'd learned a long time ago that the people who want to see you flinch are the ones you should never give that gift to. So I kept my hands folded on the table and let him have his moment. We were in the back office of a law firm in downtown Akron, the kind of place with leather chairs that cost more than my car and a coffee machine nobody offered to use. My father had been gone 11 days. The casseroles at the house had already gone bad, and the relatives who'd flown in from Florida were itching to get back before their flights changed prices. Everyone wanted this part over with, everyone except my brother Brant, who'd been waiting for this reading the way some people wait for the lottery numbers. The attorney, a tired woman named Ms. Okafor who'd handled my father's affairs for 2 decades, kept reading. To my son Brant, I leave the house on Lakeview, the Sandusky rental property, and my shares in Hartwell Logistics. Brant nodded along like a man checking items off a grocery list he'd written himself. The house alone was worth $600,000. The rental brought in money every month without him lifting a finger. And the logistics shares, well, those were the kind of thing you bragged about at dinner parties. He had it all mapped out. I could see it in his face. To my daughter, Delphine, Ms. Merce. Okafor continued, and hear her voice soften just slightly, the way people's voices do when they know what's coming and feel bad about it. I leave the Sweetwater Bakery on Larchmont Avenue and the building it sits in. That was it. A bakery that hadn't sold a loaf of bread in 3 years. A building in a neighborhood everyone had written off. My father had owned half of Summit County, or so it felt growing up, and what he handed me was a shuttered shop with brown paper still taped over the windows. The room got quiet for a second, and that's when Brant couldn't help himself. He leaned back, crossed his arms, and gave me that grin he'd been wearing since we were kids, splitting a candy bar where he always took the bigger half. "You hear that?" he said to our mother, who was sitting 2 seats down. Dad finally admitted what we all knew. "She gets the trash." He looked at me. "No offense, Delphine, it's just, you were never the one he counted on. You know that." Some of the relatives shifted in their seats. My aunt looked to the carpet, but nobody said a word in my defense, and the person whose silence cut the deepest was sitting right beside him. My mother, Corinne, folded her hands and stared at a spot on the wall. She didn't tell Brant to stop. She didn't reach over and squeeze my arm. She just sat there in her grey funeral dress with her good pearls on, letting her son carve me up in front of the whole family. I'd spent 12 years building a career 2 states away, working as a structural engineer on bridges and overpasses, the kind of work where being wrong gets people killed, so you learn to be right and you learn to be quiet about it. I'd come home maybe twice a year. And in that family, twice a year made you a stranger. Brant had stayed in Ohio, golfed with the right people, married a woman from the country club, and somewhere along the way he convinced everyone, including himself, that staying close was the same thing as being loyal. "That concludes the reading," Ms. Okafor said. "Your father's wishes are documented and legally sound. If anyone has questions, my office is open." Brant was already on his feet, shaking hands, accepting condolences that sounded more like congratulations. "We'll get the Lakeview Pace appraised next week," he told someone. Then he turned to me one more time because of course he did. "Hey, if you ever need help unloading that bakery, I know a guy who does demolition. Probably the kindest thing you could do for that building." I grabbed my coat. My father raised me to know the difference between a fight worth having and a fight you have just to bleed. This wasn't the place. So I walked out into the parking lot, and the cold March air hit me like a slap, and for the first time in days I could actually breathe. Brant followed me out. Of course he did. His loafers clicked across the asphalt. "Don't be sour about it," he said. "You never wanted any of this anyway. You ran off to build your bridges. You can't be mad that Dad gave the real stuff to the kid who actually showed up." I turned around. "Showed up for what, Brant?" "Sunday dinners where you complained about your golf score." His smile thinned out. Watch it. You watch it. I unlocked my car. I'm going to go see my bakery. He laughed again, that bark that always made my teeth grind. Have fun. Bring a flashlight, the power's probably been cut. I drove away with his laughter still hanging in the cold, and my mother never once came out to see how I was. The thing about Larchmont Avenue is that it didn't used to be a punchline. When I was a girl, my father used to take me there on Saturday mornings. The Sweetwater Bakery belonged to an old woman my dad called Miss Daisy, though everyone in the neighborhood just called her Miss Aisy. She made these almond rolls that I still dream about, and she'd let me sit on a stool behind the counter and watch her work the dough with hands that looked like tree bark and moved like a pianist's. I hadn't thought about Miss A in years. But pulling onto Larchmont that afternoon, with the four-leaf signs hanging in half the windows and weeds pushing through the sidewalk cracks, I remembered her clear as day, and I remembered something else, something I couldn't quite place yet. Just a feeling that my father bringing me here all those years wasn't an accident. The bakery sat on the corner, 2 stories of red brick gone dark with grime. The paper over the windows had yellowed. The sign still said Sweetwater in faded gold letters. I parked, and I stood on the sidewalk for a long minute just looking at it, this thing my father thought was worth giving me, this thing my brother thought was worth a demolition crew. The key Ms. Okafor had given me was an old brass thing, heavier than it looked. I expected the lock to fight me. It turned smooth as butter. Inside it smelled like dust and old cinnamon, like the ghost of every morning that bakery had ever had. But here's what stopped me cold. The place wasn't a ruin. The display cases were empty but clean. The big steel ovens in the back gleamed. Somebody had been maintaining this place, oiling the hinges, keeping the rats out, paying the heat enough to keep the pipes from bursting. A dead bakery doesn't keep itself. I walked through slow, running my hand along the marble counter Miss A used to roll dough on. On the wall behind the register there was a framed photo I'd never seen. My father, young, maybe 30, standing next to Miss A in front of this very building. They were both laughing at something. On the bottom of the frame, in my dad's blocky handwriting, it said, Sweetwater, where it all started, 1989. Where? What all started? My father made his money in trucking and real estate. He'd never owned a bakery, not that I knew of. I stood there staring at that photo, and I felt the first thread of something pull loose in my chest. That's when somebody knocked on the front door. I jumped about a foot. Through the dusty glass I could see a man, older, broad-shouldered, grey hair cut close. He had a thermos in one hand and was peering in like he had every right to. I opened the door a crack. Can I help you? You'd be Delphine, he said. Not a question. You've got your daddy's stubborn jaw. Who are you? Name's Eduardo Salstowo. I run the hardware store 2 doors down. Been there 31 years. He held up the thermos. Coffee. Figured the heat in here might be touchy. Your father asked me to look in on you when the day came. I just stared at him. My father asked you. Came by about a month before he passed. Sharp as ever, but I could tell something was wrong with him by then. Spent the better part of an afternoon in there with the lights on. Eduardo nodded past me into the bakery. Told me his girl might show up one day looking like the whole world had turned its back on her. Said to remind you that the things people throw away are usually the things they were too small to understand. My throat went tight. I stepped back and let him in. He poured coffee into the thermos cap and handed it to me. You know about Miss Daisy? A little. She owned this place. A little. She owned this place. My dad brought me here when I was a kid. Eduardo smiled, and it took 20 years off his face. She owned a lot more than this place, but she lived simple. Your father met her when he was 22, broke, sleeping in his truck. She gave him a job sweeping floors and a cot in the back room. Taught him everything he knew about treating people right and reading a deal before it read you. He sipped his coffee. When she passed, she left this building to him. Just this one. Out of everything she had, this is the piece she wanted in his hands. And now it's in yours. Why? I asked. Why give me a closed-down bakery when my brother got the house and the rentals and the shares? Eduardo's smile faded into something more serious. Did your father ever strike you as a man who did things without a reason? He didn't. That was the thing. My father was the most deliberate man I ever knew. He measured twice and cut once in everything. Business, family, all of it. There's a panel under the stairs, Eduardo said, nodding toward the back. Behind the flower storage. Your daddy said you'd know what to do when you found it. Said you were the only one in the family who ever bothered to look underneath things. He set his coffee down and tipped an imaginary hat. I'll leave you to it. But Delphine, do yourself a favor. Don't tell your brother what you find until you understand it yourself. Some things, once they're spoken, can't be put back in the box. He left. I stood there in the empty bakery with a cooling cup of coffee and a heartbeat I could feel in my ears. The flower storage was a walk-in closet off the kitchen, lined with empty steel bins. It took me 20 minutes to find the panel Eduardo meant, a section of wainscoting under the stairs that gave a hollow knock when I rapped it. The screws were old, but somebody had oiled them recently. I had a multi-tool in my bag, the kind of thing engineers carry without thinking. I worked the panel loose. Behind it was a steel lockbox, the heavy kind, sitting on a shelf cut into the wall. There was an envelope taped to the top with my name on it in my father's handwriting. Delphine. Just that. I sat down on the floor of that dusty closet, and I opened it. The first thing inside the box wasn't money. It was paper, a thick stack of it, and the top sheet was a property survey. I'd read 100 surveys in my career. This one was for the entire block of Larchmont Avenue, and my father's name was on the deeds for 9 of the 11 parcels. Not just the bakery, the hardware store building, the empty lots, the boarded-up theatre on the corner, the whole stretch. My hands were shaking when I got to the second document. It was a notice of intent, dated 4 months before my father died, from the State of Ohio Department of Transportation. They were extending the commuter rail line, and the new station, the document said in dry government language, was slated for the intersection of Larchmont and 6th, right outside the bakery window. I knew exactly what that meant. I'd worked on transit projects. A new rail station doesn't just bring trains. It brings developers, coffee chains, apartment towers, 100 businesses that all need a place to put down roots. The dead end of Cleveland my brother joked about was about to become the most valuable corner in the county, and my father had quietly bought up almost the entire block before anyone else knew it was coming. Under the survey was a letter, longer than the envelope on top, folded in thirds. I unfolded it with hands that wouldn't stay still. Delphine, it began. If you're reading this in that flower closet, then I was right about your brother, and I'm sorry I was. I hoped I'd be wrong. I watched the two of you grow up, and I saw early which one of you measured the world by what you could take from it, and which one measured it by what you could build. Brant sees the house and the shares, because that's all he can see. You'll see Larchmont, because Miss A taught me how to see, and I think somewhere along the way I taught you. This block is going to be worth more than everything I left your brother combined. But that was never the point, and I need you to hear me on that. Miss A didn't give me this corner so I could get rich. She gave it to me so I'd remember where I came from and so I'd do something with it. I never did. I got busy and rich and scared, and I sat on it for 30 years. Don't make my mistake. Build something here that would have made her proud. The papers are all in order. Call my attorney. She has the rest. I sat on that floor and cried in a way I hadn't let myself cry at the funeral. Not because of the money, because for my whole life I had believed I was the child my father tolerated, and in one letter he told me I was the one he trusted with the thing that mattered most. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Brant, a text. How's the dump? Find any rats? I read it twice and started laughing through the tears because he had no idea, none at all. I locked the box back up, put the panel back, and I drove home to my hotel that night, already knowing my brother was not going to take this lying down once he found out. Men like Brent never lose quietly. I called Miss Okafor the next morning. She'd been waiting for my call. Over the phone, she confirmed everything. The deeds, the rail notice, the valuations. My father's estate had structured the Larchmont Holdings as a separate entity, fully transferred to me, airtight. Your father came to me 3 months before he passed, she said. He knew exactly what he was doing. He told me your brother would contest it, and he made sure there was nothing to contest. She paused. He also told me to tell you something, that he was proud of you, and that he should have said it more while he was alive. I had to set the phone down for a minute after that. But Eduardo had been right about one thing. The minute money is in the air, people smell it. It took Brand 11 days. I'd come back to Larchmont every day that week, walking the block, making notes, the way I do, sketching what the corner could be. I didn't tell anyone, but Brandt golfed with a man whose brother worked for the county, and the rail extension was about to go public, and on the 12th day my brother's name lit up my phone at 7 in the morning. You knew, he said. No hello. You knew about the rail line, and you sat there at the reading playing the poor little victim. Good morning to you too. Don't. That whole block is yours. Dad bought up Larchmont and gave it to you. Do you have any idea what that's worth? I have a pretty good idea, actually. He went quiet for a second, and when he came back his voice had changed, gone smooth and reasonable, which was always more dangerous with Brandt than the yelling. Okay, look. Clearly, Dad wasn't thinking straight at the end. We both know that. A man in his condition, signing over assets like that, it's not sound. We should sit down, the three of us, you, me, Mom, and figure out how to split this fairly. As a family. There it was. Fairly. As a family. The same family that watched him call me trash and didn't blink. Dad was sharper 3 months before he died than you've been your whole life, I said. The estate's settled, Brandt. The lawyers got it locked. We'll see about that. And he hung up. He didn't waste time. 2 days later, I got a call from a man who introduced himself as a regional acquisitions director for a development company out of Columbus. They'd heard about the Larchmont parcels, he said. They were prepared to make a generous offer, all cash, quick close. He named a number that had a lot of zeros in it. I told him the block wasn't for sale. He told me offers like this didn't come twice. I told him neither did corners next to a brand new rail station, and I hung up. I found out later Brandt had tipped them off, hoping that if he couldn't take the block, he could at least force a sale and fight for a cut. When that didn't work, he got a lawyer. The papers came on a Thursday. He was petitioning to have my father declared mentally incompetent at the time of the asset transfer, which would have avoided the whole thing and dried everything back into the estate to be split down the middle. It was an ugly move. It meant standing up in court and telling a judge that our father, the most clear-eyed man either of us ever knew, had lost his mind at the end. I called Miss Okafor. She didn't sound worried. He's got no standing, she said. Your father underwent a full cognitive evaluation when he restructured the estate. I insisted on it precisely because I knew this might happen. The neurologist's report is part of the file. Brand's lawyer will see it in discovery and tell him to drop it. But Delphine, understand, he's not trying to win. He's trying to make this expensive and painful enough that you'd rather give him a peace than fight. He doesn't know me very well, I said. That made her laugh. No, I don't think he ever did. The next part is the part I'm not proud of, how much I enjoyed. My mother called. First time since the funeral. Her voice was careful, the way it gets when she wants something. Delphine, honey, your brother is hurting. He feels left out. Can't you two find a way to work this out? I hate seeing my children at war. I want you to understand something about my mother. She is not a cruel woman. But she is a woman who learned a long time ago that the path of least resistance ran straight through whatever Brandt wanted. He was the loud one, the demanding one, and somewhere in the wiring of our family it became my job to be the one who absorbed it so he wouldn't make a scene. Mom, I said, and my voice was steadier than I expected. Were you hurting when he called me trash at the reading? Silence. Were you hurting when nobody said a word, when you sat there in Dad's good pearls and let him do it? That's not fair, Delphine. It's exactly fair. That's the problem. I took a breath. I'll tell you what, you come to the bakery. Just you, not Brandt. I'll show you what Dad actually left me, and then you tell me whether he was out of his mind. She came that Saturday. I watched her little sedan pull up to the curb and idle there for a minute before she got out. like she was bracing herself. She walked in wearing slacks and a cardigan, no pearls this time, and she looked smaller than I remembered, the way our parents start to look when we finally see them as people. I'd cleaned the place up. I'd had the power turned fully on, the windows uncovered, the light pouring in across that marble counter. I'd pinned my sketches up on the wall, the drawings of what the corner could become, and I'd laid the documents out on the counter. The deeds, the survey, the rail notice, my father's letter. She read it all without a word. I watched her face change as she went. The survey, the rail station, the 9 parcels, and then the letter, my father's handwriting, the part about which child measured the world by what they could take and which by what they could build. When she finished, she put her hand flat on the counter to steady herself, and she said, very quietly, he knew all of it. He knew. She looked up at me, and her eyes were wet. I've been wrong about so many things. I let your brother be the loud one, and I let you be the strong one, and I never stopped to think about what that cost you. I told myself you didn't need me as much because you never complained. Her voice cracked. But you needed me to stand up for you at that table, and I didn't. I just sat there. Yeah, I said, you did. I can't take it back. No, you can't. But I came around the counter and I stood next to her, and after a minute I let her take my hand, because she was still my mother, and because I was tired of carrying it. Brant's lawsuit collapsed in discovery, exactly like Miss Okafor said it would. The neurologist's report ended it. His own attorney told him to walk away before he buried himself in fees over a case with no flaw under it. He called me one last time, furious, and said I'd torn the family apart, that I'd chosen money over my own blood, all the things people say when they're the ones who reached for the knife first and missed. I let him talk. Then I said the only thing I had left to say to him. Dad gave you the house and the shares and the rentals, Brant. He gave you more than most people get in a lifetime. The only reason you can't enjoy it is that you found out I got something too. Think about that. Think about what kind of man can't stand that his sister got a corner of the world to call her own. And I hung up, and I blocked his number, and I felt the strangest thing. Not triumph. Just quiet. I didn't sell Larchmont. The developers came back twice more, and twice more I told them no. Instead, I did what my father told me to do, what he'd been too busy and too scared to do himself for 30 years. I built something. It took 2 years. I kept my engineering job for the first one, working nights and weekends on the plans, then finally left to do it full time. The Sweetwater Bakery opened again on a Saturday morning in the spring, and we used Miss A's almond roll recipe, the real one, which Eduardo had kept in a recipe box in his hardware store the whole time, waiting for someone to ask. But the bakery was just the front of it. Behind it, in the building my father bought, and the 8 others around it, I built a culinary training program for women coming out of hard places, women rebuilding after prison, after addiction, after husbands who'd convinced them they were worth nothing. They learned to bake. They learned to run a register, manage a budget, walk into a room with their heads up. Some of them have gone on to open shops of their own. The rail station opened the year after we did. Now there are trains every 20 minutes. And the corner my brother wanted to demolish is the busiest in the neighborhood, and every morning there's a line out the door of the bakery for almond rolls and the second chances we sell alongside them. My mother works the register 2 days a week. She wears an apron now instead of pearls, and she's better with the customers than anyone I've hired. She missed standing up for me 30 years ago, but she's standing now, and I've made my peace with the math of that. Brant sold the Lakeview house within 18 months. I heard he sank the money into some investment that went sideways. He never came to see the bakery, and I never invited him. The last I heard, he'd moved to Arizona, still telling anyone who'd listen that his sister cheated him out of his inheritance. He didn't get cheated. He got exactly what our father saw in him, no more and no less. That was the whole point. There's a stool behind the register now, the same kind I used to sit on as a girl watching Miss A work the dough. Sometimes a kid wanders in with a parent and I'll let them sit on it and watch. And I think about my father bringing me here on Saturday mornings, planting something in me so quietly I didn't notice for 30 years, knowing all along which corner of the world he'd one day trust me to build. The cruelest thing my brother ever said to me was that I smelled like flour and failure. He was half right. I do smell like flour most days now, and I've never been prouder of anything in my life. The failure was always going to be his, because he could only ever count what he held in his hands. And I learned, from a man sleeping in his truck who got taken in by a woman with tree bark hands, how to count what you build for other people instead. That's the inheritance that mattered. Brant never even knew it was on the table.